Welcome to Philanthropy SA. This is a podcast about and for the philanthropic community in San Antonio and South Texas. We introduce organizations and people who are making an impact in the community. Beneficent Financial is proud to sponsor this podcast, and it is our hope that you enjoy this conversation about the impact we can have. The goal is to edify and inspire. Now please join our host, Dan Rebmann.
Hi, welcome to Philanthropy SA. This is Dan Rebmann, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Eric Cooper, who is and I should have asked this ahead of time, is it CEO, Executive Director, Grand Poobah?
Just that food bank guy works, right?
Food bank guy, food bank guy. I like that. That's awesome. That is awesome. So he is in charge of the food bank here in San Antonio, and that's not a small task. We have an incredible food bank that does a lot of work, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, Eric, I want to hear a little bit about you and what brought you to San Antonio.
Well, number one, Dan, thanks so much for having me on the show. And,
my pleasure.
Excited because philanthropy is such a transformative opportunity for, I think, our community and just people. And so the privilege of running a nonprofit that's relying on philanthropy, it all kind of comes together. So excited to have some conversation with you. But I've had the privilege of working in this space for about 31 years. I started back in 1993 at the Utah Food Bank shortly after selling a small business. I was an entrepreneur, a business major, and thought I was going to just take over the world. And life happened, and some of that life caused me to reflect, who did God want me to be? What was I supposed to be doing? And how would I serve? And that life experience was finding my dad homeless. And we had been estranged for a few years, and I had been looking for him. And it took me on a multi-state journey, but found him in Oregon. And but he was nourished because a woman that had a catering business, at the end of the day, rather than throwing away food that she didn't sell, she drove the streets and fed the homeless. And so I came home realizing, boy, I couldn't see an individual in need as a stranger. I saw him as a brother or sister, but literally I was seeing him as my dad. And what was I going to do about it? And I took the opportunity to start looking and stumbled into the food bank and started volunteering and then started working there. And then fast forward back in 2001, I was working for the North Texas Food Bank in Dallas and just in South Oak Cliff, and a lot of need. But when I looked at food banks across the country, South Texas covers some of the most impoverished communities, and where could I really have an impact and make a difference? And so they were looking to hire a CEO, and the board here recruited me. And in some ways, a 31-year-old trying to, do good was given an opportunity to really serve. And now, whatever that is, 23 years later, just really San Antonio is home. It's where my wife and I raised our 5 kids. And we grew roots, and it's been just an amazing experience seeing our community come together. Again, that term philanthropy, and I think of helping everyone live in their finest hour, and sometimes that's people of resources giving and sharing, but sometimes it's someone in need receiving the nourishment that they need. But every day has been a privilege.
No, that's awesome. It's a beautiful story, and like a lot of beautiful stories, it's, obviously tinged with some not so fun parts. Didn't know the part about your father and that's interesting. So talk a little bit about the transition from the business world to the nonprofit world, because, a lot of folks in the nonprofit world, it's kind of like they come out of college and they're immediately in that ecosystem, right? Yeah. And they don't know another one. And then sometimes it's people like you who are like, have made this transition kind of, obviously I think the story you just mentioned talks about that and does that. But then what is it that, what have you found? What is it that made you decide, okay, this is what I got to do?
Yeah. So again, a different time and era, but that crossover from for-profit to nonprofit, I think at first was met with discouragement. A lot of my mentors were like, hey, what are you thinking? Like, you should just do really well and then donate to nonprofit. I mean, that's great work. My mom was like, what? You're going to volunteer? Like, give up your earning potential? Like, do you get paid to work at a nonprofit? And then, just this opportunity to, I think, naively enter a cause area, and lots of different causes out there and issues. And, hunger is truly a symptom of a bigger issue, which is poverty. And I always think it's easier to meet that immediate needs of hunger than the long-term kind of root cause aspects of it. But when I started, I really thought, hey, there's a problem to be solved here. Let me just take a few years, solve it, and then I'll move on, And, as I got into the work, I realized how naive that was, but how complex this issue is. And but the same principles that I was familiar with in for-profit of trying to find capital investors and folks that wanted a return on their investment, they were extending trust. They saw performance, and they continued to invest, and was a little bit the same in the nonprofit. That principle of community investing in you and delivering good ROI and being a good steward and helping them understand that the returns don't necessarily go back to them, but go to the community, and really framing the food bank in that business model of, if you give me $1, what does that mean? Now, for all nonprofits, they all kind of scrutinize themselves from the third-party 990 tax data. Like, hey, if I give you $1, how much of it goes to programming, right? Like, how much goes to admin? And for us, we just want to be the most efficient nonprofit on the planet. That is our mantra. We are committed to it. And so just 2 cents out of every $1. So we're the most efficient nonprofit in the community. If you gave us $1, we can actually turn out 7 meals or 10 pounds of food, or literally $13 worth of food. Now, that's going up as inflation has impacted the cost of food, that $1 is actually yielding a little bit more, but some of our expenses went up that offset it. But, that kind of ROI creates people wanting to invest. They want to give to us because they see, like, hey, there's some healthy returns there. They're doing good. And that transparency and impact has been a core part of, I think, the San Antonio Food Bank's growth and success over the last 20-plus years. I will say, going back to your, initial question, and then me being young and naive, there wasn't a lot of universities and colleges educating people to get a job in the nonprofit space. It wasn't really a degree that I saw emerge in the time I've been in the space, where now it's front and center. There's a lot of universities educating, and it comes with some, maybe discomfort or heartache. As I understood the complexity of the issue, I realize more today that the food bank can't solve this problem. I'm a believer in business. I believe in the power of work, and I need more NBAs of conscience than I need MSWs, right? Mm-hmm. That I think a community of conscience, really a business that's responsible. So if I can get those NBAs of conscience better taking care of their workforce, then I don't have to, right? And so in some ways, universities have done me the disfavor of really putting people out into making a problem sometimes bigger, in that theory of many nonprofits suggest we're trying to work ourselves out of a job. The line over the 30 years has gotten longer, and so maybe I should be fired because I don't know that I'm making any headway. I know that we're providing nourishment to the line. We definitely have in our organization shorten the line strategies. We're trying to move people to self-sufficiency and self-reliance, but I think all of us in the community have a role to play in shortening that line, and it starts with wage. It starts with access to the resources that families and people need in a community. And sadly, our community is imbalanced in the economic sense that creates a line for us at the food bank.
Yeah, and I've heard this over and over again, not just recently since doing the podcast, though certainly on this with various guests, but just over the years. The sad reality is that San Antonio is, it's unique in many things, and many of those unique elements are wonderful and what makes it such a great community to live in. One of them that is not so wonderful is the fact that, we do have a very large percentage of our population that, is living at a poverty level or below. And that's certainly something that you and other folks are working on, and we very much appreciate that. It's funny when we talk about that in terms of working yourself out of a job. I remember reading somewhere that the poor will always be among you. So, that's I think it's a great thing to strive for, but I also think it's something that we're just going to have to work with. So let's talk about the food bank and the way that you serve folks, because I think when people think food bank, depending on their interaction with the food bank, they may have been a recipient of aid in the past, and it's like, wow, this was a great lifeline that I needed. They may be people who have habitually donated, whether that's cash or whether it's, like all the drives that you see where it's like, hey, drop some cans of food or whatever in the bin and it's going to go to the food bank and that kind of thing. But I know there's so much more to it than that. And I also know it's more than, there's the infamous video that went viral during COVID of San Antonio, and I think that was down at the Alamo Dome and that whole thing. So anyway, but just talk to us about the food bank, the programs, what you all do, because it's a lot more than just me dropping a can of food in a bin and then you handing it to somebody else.
Yeah, so we are privileged to be one of 200 food banks across the United States that make up a national entity called Feeding America. Now, every food bank is an independent 501c3, but we link together in this association for efficiencies and really impact and not duplicating services. In the great state of Texas, all 254 counties are served by about 20 Feeding America food banks. Our service territory, larger than just San Antonio, although we're branded San Antonio Food Bank, we serve 29 counties. Wow. Within those 29 counties, we have about 800 different partners, oftentimes churches or other nonprofits that help us in feeding about 105,000 people each week. So it's a large scale. Our main headquarters is at 151 and Old Highway 90. We receive about a semi-truckload an hour, between 8 to 12 truckloads of food every day to try to meet the needs to nourish the 105,000 people that are coming. We offer programming that is strategic in 3 areas that we frame as food for today, food for tomorrow, and then food for a lifetime. The food for today is really meeting people's immediate needs for food. Cupboards bare, refrigerators empty, I need groceries, or I need a meal. And we provide meals to the homeless and to migrants and really individuals that don't have access to a kitchen. But the bulk of our food flows in groceries that people would prepare themselves. And we meet that need for anyone that is food insecure. Income is the biggest driver for qualification. And so it's important for me to mention, if you're listening right now and you're struggling, please reach out to us at the food bank. You could go online at safoodbank.org, or you could call us at 210-431-8326. That will connect you to resources that I'm going to start to share in just a moment. So food for today, that's immediate access to groceries or meals. The second area of our work is what we call food for tomorrow, and that's really, now that we've gotten you food, have you considered getting your kids enrolled in the National School Lunch Program? Are you participating in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly the Food Stamp Program? If they're a young mom with kids, the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, WIC. They might need health insurance, so Medicaid, temporary assistance to needy families. There's a lot of federal programs which can include, in some of our counties, utility assistance, but we think of those as household stabilization strategies. And to be honest, that's the bigger bang for the buck. If you think of the food bank with our Food for Today strategy, it's maybe impressive. In a 12-month period, we'll handle about $150 million in groceries that we'll distribute to families. But in that Food for Tomorrow strategy, it's about $250 million in benefits that we draw down from federal resources to deploy locally with families that then trickle into our economy, right? Physicians get paid for services, grocers, ranchers, dairies, etc. All of that economic impact also goes along with helping a family. In that process of Food for Tomorrow, we learn who's working and who's not working, and the majority of the families that we work with, the parents are working. They're just not making enough. But for those that are seeking higher employment or trying to remedy unemployment, our Food for a Lifetime strategies, which is the last tier of our work, is really about workforce development, job training, job placement. So we have culinary schools that we run. We've got a warehouse training program, but we work in consortium with SA Ready to Work, with Workforce Solutions Alamo. In fact, Workforce Solutions Alamo is co-located at the food bank so that we can help those individuals transition. I mentioned earlier, hunger is really not a food issue. It's really a wage issue. Of the 105,000 people we feed each week, the most common profile is they're female, she's a Latina, she's a parent, and she's working. She just isn't making enough or doesn't have an employer that provides PTO. There's no leave with compensation. There's no health care benefits. And so she's threading, hours and an hourly wage to try to meet the needs of an economy that just is unkind, right? Rent eats first in all of these households, and there just isn't anything left over. And so we're trying to help her, usually on average, 4 times a year. She's usually not coming to get food frequently. It's just those pinches of the car breaking down, or utility bills are high during the summer or Christmas, and I'm trying to meet all those expectations. And so if I could get a little bit of help, I could make that happen. And so she's doing all she can. There's a great parable that oftentimes people quote of, you can give a man a fish and feed him for a day, or you can teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. And I tend to think of it as if she'd love to meet you at the dock, but she can't. Her babies are hungry, and so you need to pack a tuna fish sandwich if you want her to meet you at the dock, and you better make sure that the fishing industry has a wage that moves her forward, because otherwise she's just frustrated. And so threading those components, I think, ultimately creates a city where everybody thrives.
Yeah, no, first of all, there's a lot of stuff there, and we're going to dive down into a little bit more of it. But first, we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsor.
Many of you out there care deeply about wanting to make an impact on the world around you. You want to help take care of the people and organizations that are important to you. We understand that because we feel the same way. Beneficent Financial wants to help you. Our mission is to help people like you with professional, individualized financial advice achieve their objectives. Whether your financial legacy will stay within your family or benefit the community at large, we are able to help. Call Beneficent Financial today at 210-999-5511. In addition to traditional wealth management, we offer philanthropic services such as direct donations of required minimum distributions, donor-advised funds, and foundations. Call 210-999-5511 or go online to beneficentfinancial.net. Let us help you do well so you can do good. Securities offered through Momentum Independent Network, member SIPC/FINRA.
Welcome back. This is Dan Rebmann with Philanthropy SA, and I'm joined today by Eric Cooper, the CEO of the San Antonio Food Bank, although as we learned a while ago, it's actually South Texas Food Bank would probably be a better
descriptor.
Yeah. So So you were talking about the programs and that type of thing, and one that I just knew about from my past experience when I was on the board at another organization is like the job training programs that you have and that type of thing. So when we look at the opportunities that are out there, in this particular case, it was the food bank provided a chef who taught individuals with disabilities, primarily learning disabilities and kind of on the spectrum, those types of folks, and gave them opportunities to learn critical skills and work in a commercial kitchen. And then they could have jobs in the major hotels in town and at the Lackland Air Force Base and these kind of places where they're putting out, large quantities of meals all the time. And that was just a great program. And so why don't you talk a little more about some of those types of programs and other things that we don't even think about the food bank doing. So.
Yeah, and so again, it's really helping a neighbor in need that might be struggling with employment, either because of low wage or unemployment, to get the skills to ultimately get a job. I love the concept of pathways and kind of stacking your education to hopefully stack bills in your wallet, right? Like the more educated, hopefully the better paid or the more sustainable wage you can earn. Most of these individuals unskilled that are looking for employment. And so when we can get them into a training program, and there's about 32 different training programs from IT to nursing in this consortium with Workforce Solutions Alamo. So I'm going to highlight the programs we offer on site, but to a listener, if you're like, hey, I don't want to become a chef, sometimes the culinary industry has lower wages. So we strategically try to get the skills and training of our talent kind of middle of the kitchen so that they've got some upward mobility and they might transition to other areas of the business or continue a secondary education that could potentially provide a better wage. But you nailed it. I mean, I think one of the benefits of being in the kind of culinary arts space is just that the person that we cook for the most is ourselves. And you can make life a whole lot more enjoyable with some knowledge of how to prepare food and make it tasty. Secondly, you prepare food for your loved ones, your family. And if you're single, hey, this could be a credential that could land you a great spouse, right? Like knowing how to cook. Who doesn't want to marry a good chef? But in business, right, the opportunity to get a job and to work in an area of creation and really of nourishment. And the industry is so large from, you mentioned large-scale government installations that might need production work. You have schools and large cafeterias, but you've got restaurants, hotels. You might have a small food truck to grocery stores. So much of today's society, because of the iPhone and the fast pace of work, convenience has become much more front and center. So we just don't have time to shop. So home delivered or curbside, or you shop at H-E-B, and so much of the front of the store now is stocked with heat and eat options or ready to eat options because, hey, look, I can buy this entree and microwave it or cook it off in the oven, and quickly I've got delicious food, and I didn't have to take the time. Our challenge in the space of the food bank is my neighbor, my client can't afford some of that convenience. So, but she needs it. She's juggling via and transportation and childcare issues and working those same jobs. And so the inequality sometimes can be fast food in exchange for a meal simple, right? It's the health effects of poverty takes years off of people's lives. There's a saying that poverty takes more years off of someone's life than smoking. And when you really think about zip codes determining life expectancy in our city, it can be up to 16 years difference in life expectancy based on which zip code you grew up in. And that's not the city that we want, right? We shouldn't be so socioeconomically divided. And so, shrinking that down, creating an environment where everyone can thrive is a bit of what the food bank's trying to do, and doing it through the power of food to bring people to the table, to have these kind of conversations, and how grateful I am to be with you, just to explain a little bit about what we need to get to that destination, how we work as an organization. We tend to think we need 4 things to operate. We need food. Obviously, we're a food bank, and folks can donate in lots of different ways. We literally procure food from the field to the dinner table. We work with farmers and growers and food manufacturers and wholesalers, great grocery retailers like H-E-B and Walmart and all of them, but restaurants, hotels, caterers. We are most known for food drives when people donate a non-perishable food item, but that is meaningful but represents about 3% of our total volume. Most of it comes from the industry. We do get government commodities as a part of our mix, and we rescue food, like I said, from those hotels and restaurants. And then if you're a hunter, we have a program called Hunters for the Hungry. So we have a part of our culinary school is meat carving. And so for those, what was formerly called a butcher, there's a lot of business opportunity and jobs in that sector. And so during season, we process hundreds of deer and that lean protein that is available to the neighbors we serve. So waste not, want not when it comes to food. We never want food to go to waste, be thrown away. And the food bank's business strategy is just working the industry to get that from those that have it to those that need it. The second thing we need is money, right? So food and money. And we just promise to be a good steward, as I mentioned earlier, to leverage your dollar. And you can donate online. That's the easiest way. People always ask, what do you need more, food or money? We can leverage a dollar. Food is what it is, so it's more strategic to invest the dollar. We need time. That's the third thing we need. We need volunteers, and we're so blessed. We have about 2,000 volunteers a week that come through our doors to make a difference. The coolest and most rewarding part of my job is just seeing, people living in their finest hour, when they're selfless, when they're being the person their God wants them to be or their mom wants them to be. They're just being the hands and feet, if you will, but they're just being so amazing. We need more volunteers, all ages, all abilities. We're the largest recipient of special needs volunteers, so and more kids volunteer at the food bank than any other nonprofit. So it's a super cool space. But the last thing we need, the fourth thing, is voice, and we frame it as voice. I'll unpack this, that it's really conversations like this. If you're listening to us talk, share this link, help people better understand the work of the food bank and get the word out. Use your social media. I think the marketing, the storytelling, the understanding is what we're trying to communicate. There's a role for public policy and advocacy, right? So much of what helps those in need is oriented in a government program. So what's working, what's not working, but being a good advocate at the state level and at the federal level for those programs. And then most importantly, the voice of prayer. I mean, a prayer can go a long way in healing, and I think an easy way to do something when you feel like, hey, what could I offer? Praying for those that are struggling, that their burdens might be lightened, is all the different ways that people can give. And so philosophically, I believe my role is to serve the entire community, those with resources and those without. So this conversation around philanthropy, it's not transactional from my perspective. It's transformational. I could care less who you give to. I would just encourage you to give. It's more important for you than it is for me. And sometimes we're like, yeah, Eric, you're just trying to soak us for some canned goods or cash. But I truly believe that my role is more of a coach. It's to try to help people in that journey of betterment and being that person they want to be. And I think a core principle of service, of giving and sharing is more healing in what's broken in all of us, that ultimately that's how I shorten the line by getting this conscience really strengthened in our city, that we have the willpower to make sure there's no poor among us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and folks know this, I think. When you participate in something like this, that good feeling that you have when you're doing it, it's like, okay, I'm giving here, but I'm also getting. And that, we see that over and over again, throughout the philanthropic world. And it's, we are in a situation where that opportunity to interact with each other and come together in community and help each other out is a beautiful thing. And so that's definitely the case. Now, I want to back up just a minute, or I should say, move the camera out to more of that 50,000-foot view. So you obviously are running one of the largest nonprofits, and you already, I hope everybody out there heard the gauntlet being dropped. They are the most efficient, so you all have a standard to, now you can try to become the most efficient. But what would you tell your brothers and sisters in the philanthropic world, or to either encourage them, or what are some of the things that you're seeing trend-wise here lately that everybody's dealing with?
Yeah, so...
I mean, I'm sure you have people line up for jobs with you and they never leave, and it's awesome, and you don't deal with some of the turnover and that your fellow, CEOs run into, but...
Well, it's a humbling space, right, when you work in an environment where people retire from USAA or Valero or HEB or, one of the great companies we're privileged to work with, and because they retire, now they're volunteering and serving. And I get the privilege of working in this industry. So I guess when I retire, I got to go to Valero or something, and so, it's this incredible opportunity that I think the food bank has to have a recipe that's working. And because it's working, it's attracted the investments of the community. And we're just working hard to be a good steward and hold that integrity and impact where we need it. I think for any nonprofit, it's a struggle to have the resources. Fundraising is brutal, and the dollars are tight. But I think being creative, being nimble, being responsive, most of all being transparent, sharing the impact, I think people appreciate that. And ultimately, people can't do what they can't see. And so just get that clear vision across of what you're doing, how you're impacting, how you're serving, and that inspiration that nonprofits provide the community, to deliver on these needs that are struggling and complex and sometimes it's not your issue, maybe like abuse or addiction or, some of those things that many don't experience, maybe chronic diseases like cancer, et cetera. And so you're like, well, that hasn't been my family's cause because we maybe have never been impacted. And then you see where, okay, we were impacted and now that is our cause. And so just... Lastly, I would say what's trending and sometimes a little bit frustrating is, when I started, there was a little bit more of this credo of do no harm, right? As a nonprofit, really think about when you're expanding and growing, is there a resource in the community that you could partner with, that you could leverage, that you could strengthen rather than duplicate, because the preciousness of the philanthropic dollar was so short. Do you really want competition? I definitely think there is much more competition in the nonprofit market than there ever was. And some of it is going back to that, more people graduating to want to grow in this sector. And so, hey, we do it better. There's even one nonprofit that says they do the most good, trying to get an advantage over maybe like I'm more worthy. I think all of these organizations are worthy, but I think really thinking strategically, and the worst thing a philanthropic activity could support is the duplication, or a philanthropist that their ego starts to drive a program that is duplicatory in the community. And that happens too often. Like, I'm going to start my own nonprofit. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do this. Well, hey, there's this nonprofit that already does that. They would be much more strategic if they would align their passion into an existing organization to provide their resources along with maybe their energy and leadership and exposure to have a multiplier effect rather than creating another nonprofit addressing the same issue.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that we see a lot and something I've talked to people about on this podcast before in terms of that notion, in the for-profit world, somebody would do a roll-up. They'd gather all the guys together. They'd say, here, I'm going to buy you, you, and you, and we're going to create this one entity that's a lot more efficient at doing what you all do and that type of thing. And, of course, that doesn't happen in the nonprofit world because there's nothing to buy. So it's one of those kind of situations, and it is one of the things. And at the same time, the people who start new entities, they do have that drive. They feel that calling and that, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I get that part too. But there's a lot of neat organizations, whether it's the United Way or Social Venture Partners or some of these organizations that can help those entities or help people that are looking at those opportunities do that. So why don't we wrap up by anything that
Well, just one real quick.
Oh, yeah.
As you just inspired a thought was most people don't realize that the food bank in our efforts to serve the entire household provided pet food to over 120,000 pets. We're actually the largest supporter of animals in the community. And people are like, what? And it really is because of an incredible philanthropist named Amy Gordon who wanted to start a pet food bank and came to us well over a decade ago. I'd say 15 years ago now. And she's wanted to start a nonprofit, but then saw the work of the food bank in our logistical prowess and how most pet food is sold at a retailer, some of which sell people food. So how can we partner in a way that could expand the food bank's role to more holistically serve a family, but then also manage this need for pets and keeping them housed rather than surrendered and in a shelter? And so we became the backbone organization for what's Daisy Cares, which is an independent nonprofit, but really housed and merged into the food bank like a program so that the overhead can be squeezed down and leveraged in a way that has impact. And so I think, as you mentioned, nonprofits don't buy each other out. There's too much demand out there, but sometimes mergers or consolidations. Mm-hmm. We've merged over the years with a few smaller nonprofits, absorbing their work and cause and impact because it just fit within a portfolio that maybe could be managed more efficiently or, get access to a flow of clients that unfortunately we have a large gate and there's a lot of people coming through it. And so if there were services that could be offered, we could maybe be efficient. And so anyway, it's just a privilege to be on. There's so much that we could talk about, but if you'd like to learn more, visit our website at safoodbank.org. Maybe if there's further questions, give us a call. But thank you for having me on today.
No, thank you, Eric. And I want to encourage everybody out there, if you're part of an organization, school, church, just social group, whatever, and you're looking for something to help bring you together beyond outside the scope of the organization normally, I'd encourage you to reach out to Eric and the folks at the food bank because there are opportunities to serve, and it's something that you'll walk out of there feeling that you received a lot more than you gave. So, on behalf of Philanthropy SA, this is Dan Rebmann thanking you for joining us today and just reminding everyone to do well so you can do good.
Thank you for joining us at Philanthropy SA. We hope you found something to inspire you during today's conversation. If you know organizations and people who are making an impact in the community, we would love to hear about it. Until next time, do well so you can do good.